If you enjoy this show, please share, rate, and review. The more listeners, the greater the impact.
Everybody goes to rain. Boom, boom goes the thunder. Everybody goes to rain. Boom, boom goes the thunder. Everybody goes to rain.
Here I am.
Boom, boom goes the thunder.
Look at me, I'm alright.
Everybody goes to rain.
In the storm, dancing to the rhythm of the rain.
Welcome home, where healing and restoration are celebrated in stories from those who have walked through fire and come out the other side. Welcome to the Pursuing Redemption podcast with Heather Shore.
Dancing to the rhythm of the rain.
Everybody goes to rain.
Here I am.
Goes the thunder.
Look at me, I'm alright.
Everybody goes to rain.
In the storm, dancing to the rhythm of the rain.
Hi, Frank. Thank you so much for coming on the Pursuing Redemption show. We're very excited to have you and hear about all of the amazing things that God is doing in your life, within your programs, and just within recovery in general. So welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Heather. Honored to be here today.
Great. Well, we'll just hop right in. We would love to hear a little bit of your story and your testimony of how you came to Christ.
Yeah, great. It's a great way to start, right? A little backstory. Didn't really grow up, in a religious home. I have probably a couple memories from my childhood, like centered around the church. My dad was Catholic. It was a part of their family, but it wasn't something that was really brought into our home. And I can remember a couple times, like around like Easter's and kind of the bigger holidays, like them wanting to kind of make it something special. But because my parents didn't really have the greatest marriage, we always kind of felt behind. And when we showed up to church, we were late and we're kind of standing in the back. And it's like, I felt out of place. And for me, as I was growing up, I always attached on to labels. Like my identity was always wrapped around these certain labels. One of them being like a somewhat overweight kid. I can remember having to buy jeans and pants in the Husky department at JCPenney's. So I had a label of like a more overweight kind of fat kid. Well, the label I gave myself because of the interactions we had in around the church was, we're just not church people. Like I see them and there's something different about them. So as I was growing up, I said that church thing is just not for us. I can even remember a story when I was probably around third or fourth grade. One of my best friends was very strong Catholic. They attended regular mass on Sundays, sometimes in the Latin kind of form. And there'd be weekends where I stayed at their house and I would maybe kind of go with them. And I can remember one time I got up with their entire family and I went and did like this Catholic communion. And I remember going home and talking with my family about it. And then they almost made me feel bad. Like you weren't supposed to do that. Like you've never gone through the actual process to be able to do this. So for me, there was always this disconnect from like the church is over there. Our family sits over here. We're not those people. And that was an identity that I held for a very, very long time. I got into personal development though, like in my teenage years, because I had questions. I had questions about myself. I had questions about why are we here? Kind of, what is this? What's this life about? It's more than just these bodies, right? So I think for me, the exploration and the pursuit of finding God started very, very young. But I went to these other sources because I didn't really have that foundation, right? And then there was some radical kind of experiences that took place. One significant one that I always point to was in 2017. At this point, I'd been in business, I'd been in entrepreneurship for a while, and I was ready to pivot and kind of get into this online marketing space that I kind of live and operate in now. And as somebody that is a coach himself and has had coaches in sports and had coaches in bodybuilding, I said, I probably need a business coach. So I started, I looked at a couple different masterminds, a couple different programs out there, and I ended up hiring a business coach in 2017 to help me launch my Frank Rich Fitness brand. And a part of working with this coach was a ticket and an invite to like a real mastermind event. Like actually you flew up to Toronto, you kind of sat in the boardroom with about 30-ish people at that time. And what was really cool for me to witness was the gentleman that was putting this mastermind on had his father present. I have a great relationship with my dad today. There was a lot of anger as a young man, though, directed towards him, kind of the way that like the family was kind of like the dynamic there. So I didn't have a great relationship through my 20s, but seeing this gentleman that was running this business mastermind, how close he was to his father was like I like that. Like, why is that his relationship, and why don't I have that relationship with my father? Well,
Sure.
this gentleman's dad was a pastor, and he actually got up at the end of the mastermind and gave like a little sermon, and it was really cool for me to be a part of, and it was really an introduction into now a circle of men that changed my life. So out of that mastermind, I came back down to Tampa. I got connected with other guys who are part of this group, and I started spending some time with them on a weekly basis. And this was centered around working out. We'd have some business conversations. But over the next year and a half, these guys really, and I don't think they were intentional in doing it, they just really started to work on me by how they accepted me into this group. But as an outsider, like, I began to see that there's something different about all of these guys. Like, why when I'm around them do I just feel better? Like, there was an energy in the gym that I never experienced before. And it took me about a year to 13 months to really figure it out, that the thing that made all these guys similar in who they were, but made them different from anybody else that I knew, was how they lived their life faith first, right? Was how they really modeled the light of Christ in everything that they did, how they loved me, how they loved others. So this was 2018. I was kind of going through a few different crises at the time. I was in a very toxic relationship that was kind of, crumbling beneath me. I made some very poor decisions business-wise. I was dealing with some financial issues. And I was really becoming clear that I had a massive porn addiction that was really, really having negative impact on me. So as I'm really at the lowest point in my life, I felt like I had the strongest support system around me. And then October of that year, so one guy that I met in this mastermind, his name is Josh. And over the year, from 2017 to 2018, that entire year, like, Josh and I formed a very strong relationship. He became a mentor to me on the business side. He became a close friend. He became almost like a fatherly type of uncle figure. He's a little bit older than me, a little bit further along in certain areas of life. So I used to go to him for advice. He would come to me for advice in certain areas. And he was flying down he lived in Pennsylvania. He was flying down to Orlando for the weekend. And I remember having a conversation about a week out of him saying, "Hey, Frank, I'm going to be in Orlando. It's about an hour from where you're going to be at in Tampa. Why don't you come over one day? We can spend the afternoon together." And getting prepared for that, I didn't really know what the afternoon was going to be. I was kind of just excited to see my friend that I hadn't seen in person for a while, thinking maybe we'll talk some business. We might talk about sports, what's going on with life. Well, Josh was coming down with a little bit different of a plan. And we've talked about this on my podcast. We've done an episode on his podcast as well, that he'd always felt like that he knew that I was struggling with something. And he was waiting for that right opportunity to share Christ with me. So I picked him up at his hotel in downtown Orlando. We drove a few blocks into the city. Anybody that's familiar with downtown Orlando will know that one of the main streets that runs parallel to the arena where the Magic play is Church Street. It's a big kind of bar, restaurant, party scene. And I say, "Hey, Josh, I know that this is kind of a main strip here. We'll probably be able to easily find something to eat." Now, we parked the car. We started walking. We found this steakhouse. It was, afternoon, middle of the week, like, not very busy. Waiter sits us down and said, "Hey, you guys get any drinks?" So he said, "We'll just get some water, but we're going to be here for a little while," is what he told them. And what was interesting is about 2 weeks prior to that, I know I'm kind of bouncing all over the place, but it'll all come together in a minute. About 2 weeks prior to that, I was standing in my kitchen one night, and I was about a year into trying to really build Frank Chris Fitness. We had very, very minimal success, and I was struggling to figure out why it wasn't working, because I had massive financial success in my previous business, but why wasn't this one clicking? I was doing all the marketing stuff that was taught in the mastermind. I had other friends in the fitness space that were crushing it, 6-figure months, 7-figure years. I'm doing all the things that these guys are doing. I'm applying everything I'm learning in the mastermind. Why isn't this working? And I remember literally just going to my girlfriend and being like, "Steph, I don't know. Maybe we just need to go to church. Like, maybe that's the missing piece, right? Is I don't have God in my life." And my girlfriend at the time, she had been raised Catholic, and she had some hurt from her previous experience, but she was open to entertaining it with me. But we kind of left it there. I just said this, "Hey, maybe we need to go do this." And then we didn't really pursue it anymore. So if we fast forward a couple of weeks and I'm sitting in this restaurant with Josh, he looks at me and he goes, "Frank, can I ask you a couple of questions?" I said, "Absolutely, man. You can ask me whatever you want, right? You're one of my best friends in the world." He goes, Frank, how's your relationship with your father? And what do you know about God? And it kind of shook me because not a typical like two questions you expect to get when you're just having lunch with one of your best friends. And I can remember feeling almost like a sense of peace, though, that this was going to be a conversation that possibly had the opportunity to change my life. I said, Josh, man, I have a good relationship now. It's never been the strongest. I don't really look at my dad as like a role model. He's more of a friend and a buddy. Like at this point, God, I don't really know much about him, but I'm curious why you asked that, because about 2 weeks ago, I said something to Stephanie that maybe we need to go to church. And I think he knew that was his opportunity. He said, Frank, well, if you're open for it, I'd love to kind of share some things with you. And we sat there, it probably was maybe 90 minutes to 2 hours. It felt like it went by like this, though. And he kind of shared everything. I mean, from Adam and Eve all the way through the gospel to, Christ, what he'd done, how he died for our sins. And I asked some questions there, and he kind of presented me with an opportunity right there at the table. He said, Frank, if this is something that you're interested in, I'd love to welcome Christ into your life. So we wrapped up lunch, paid for the bill, happened to be a history center across the street. We walked over there, and he put his hands on my shoulder, and, we prayed together for the first time right outside of the history center on Church Street on October 22nd of 2018. Now, Josh had flown down here with a copy of the Passion Translation, which is it's a version of the New Testament. So he took me back to his room, or I took him back to his hotel. He said, I got something for you. So he brought it down, wrote a little inscription in there for me, 10/22, 2018. There was the date that we put. There was the address of the History Center. He said, your life and the world will never be the same. And that was kind of, the beginning of this, 4-5 year journey at this point that I've been on. So yeah, that was how I kind of came, I guess, to my faith.
That's amazing. Well, welcome to the kingdom.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I guess maybe go a little bit into some of what you've had to deal with. And you briefly mentioned it, of this porn addiction. I'm sort of curious, how did that all come to play in your life? And I'm sure during this process of just healing and coming to know Jesus, when did you say enough was enough?
Yeah. Well, I got introduced to porn very, very young, probably somewhere between the ages of 5 to 6 years old, being a little nosy kid back then. So contextually, right, I'm 40 now. So when I was 6 years old, like, the internet wasn't around. So when I saw porn, at 6 years old, like, I found a magazine in my dad's drawer. Now, it wasn't a Playboy. It was very, very hardcore. But that was something that, made me very curious. And I wouldn't say that was the beginning of my addiction, but that was the beginning of behaviors that led to an addiction later on in life, right? I was the kid that, when the newspaper came on Sunday, I grabbed the newspaper as quick as I could, maybe grab the comics, but I was also looking for like the JCPenney's catalog, right? Like any man of my age will understand this. They used to send you, newspaper, and inside of that, because I didn't have access to porn, but I could maybe look at, some underwear, like, right? So
some models, yeah.
and it's interesting because looking back now, it's like, had anybody known about these things, like, it probably wouldn't have been a huge deal. They said, that's just a boy being a boy, right? But I think for me, because I was a teenager at the rise of the internet, I can remember sitting there in my room the first time, we had internet at our home, like literally looking for porn on the internet. I said, okay, well, I can just punch, I can just search on maybe Napster here or whatever. And it was, it was pictures that would take you, dial up, it'd take you an hour to, download one picture. It really became a problem in my early 20s. I was a very early adopter to Blackberries. I was working in the wireless industry, so probably one of the first 1,000 people in the US to have the color screen Blackberry. And for the younger generation that's hearing this, the Blackberry was the iPhone before the iPhone. It literally was the first phone that had full streaming internet. Because I was kind of working in a regional manager type of position, I spent a lot of my time on the road, a lot of my time in big malls. I managed about 13 kiosks across West Florida. So these are the stations that were kind of in the middle of the mall. And I can remember even back then, guys would take smoke breaks. I would take porn breaks. I literally would leave the kiosk. I'd go up to the big department store, Dillard's or Nordstrom, where you kind of have some privacy in the bathroom. And I would literally watch porn in the middle of the day, like in a bathroom in a mall. At the time, I don't think I really thought that I had an addiction. I think growing up, you're like, yeah, porn is just, it's kind of a way that guys explore their sexuality. It's something that all guys do. You maybe make some jokes about it in college. You maybe kind of joke about it a little bit with your friends, but I probably thought that maybe my behavior is a little bit abnormal. So I don't want to share this with people, but I can't be addicted, right? You can't be addicted to pornography. Truthfully, that thought never even entered my mind until probably 2018. So it wasn't until I was 35 that I actually began to maybe look at this as a problem. And it was a conversation that I heard on a podcast, which is why I'm so passionate about what I get to do here, because hearing two grown men talk about their struggles changed my life. But it was a podcast with my mentor that was, running the mastermind. He was interviewing an author, Michael John Cusick, who wrote Surfing for God. So I am 35. I was successful in bodybuilding. I had a great social life, I felt at the time. I was somewhat financially successful in business. But I had some demons and I had some things that I struggled with. I definitely somebody that struggled with some anxiety. I went through, bouts of depression, not feeling down and sad, but like real dark depression, like, feeling like you're sitting in the middle of the room and the walls are closing in on you. That's how I kind of describe depression in my experience with it, at least. And then suicidal ideation. But for me, I think because of my family's background, I've done some podcasts around suicide. We had an episode of a few weeks back where we talked about male suicide. I've had 3 generations of men in my family take their life. And, a lot of my men in my family have struggled with different types of addictions. So once again, attaching onto labels, I always label myself as, we're just a family that struggles with these things. We're just a family that has addiction. It's going to be a part of our life. I must fight through it. And that's where I think a lot of my just tenacity and just kind of punch through the wall, just get the job done. I think that's where a lot of that came from, because I saw that I had problems and I said, I can't change these things about myself. I just need to learn the skills to work through them. So a lot of the things I've been able to accomplish have come out of that. So I can't look back at it as a negative. It's obviously shaped me into what I do today. But 2018, midsummer, prior to coming to Christ, I started to, at least explore the idea of porn addiction being a real thing. It's amazing now, for me, 4 years now of running the podcast, of coaching, of doing all this work, the conversation has definitely been accepted and you see it a lot more mainstream these days. But if you think just back 5 years, there weren't people talking about porn addiction. There weren't podcasts like this. There weren't podcasts in programs like what I have. Yeah. So for me, it was really beginning to kind of understand, is this really a thing? And how much of the things that I've been going through are connected to this behavior that I've, am embarking in on a daily basis, sometimes multiple times a day. So summer, I kind of get clear and aware, hey, I got these issues. October that year, I come to my faith, try to start kind of living, a little bit differently. But even though, I accepted Christ into my life, I didn't really change a lot about my behavior at the time. One thing Josh was very adamant about is I gave you the Bible. He's like, get in the word, find a church, get plugged into community. It was probably 2 months for me to actually begin to take those steps. So January of 2019, changing into the new year, 2018 was probably the toughest year of my life. So as we rolled into 2019, he kind of set these New Year's goals and resolutions. For me, it was I'm going to change a couple of these things about me. It started with, I needed to kind of get my health back. I'd really let that, go down at the end of 2018. So went through a radical, reset diet where I began to feel a lot more mentally clear and crisp. And then February 14th, Valentine's Day, I'm back at the group. I'm back with those guys that I met in the mastermind. We're doing our weekly workout, which a lot of times was a workout and then a lunch, and then maybe we'll hang out a little bit afterwards. But for whatever reason, I had something going on that afternoon, so I wasn't able to make it to the lunch. So I stayed back after the workout. And there happened to be one other guy that was a part of the group that didn't go to lunch as well. His name is Zach. He's episode 2 of my podcast. But Zach, I said, hey, man, you got a couple minutes. I'd love to catch up with you a little bit. I know we both got to run, but, you got 10 minutes. Let's kind of, have a little catch up, conversation. So we're sitting in my car outside my friend's gym. And we're just, kind of just what's going on with life? How's the business? How's your relationship? What's going on here? And then out of nowhere, Zach goes, Frank, I want to tell you about this breathing exercises that I've been doing. It's helping me control my sexual energy. And I feel like it's helping me get rid of my porn addiction. Out of nowhere, he says this to me, right? And it's like, what are you talking about? Like porn addiction? Where did this even kind of come from? And I knew at that point, like, okay, like God is doing something here. Because Zach is like, he's not the guy that I would ever look at as like somebody that struggled with this. He was a Marine, radically fit, like sharp mentally, like master's degree, like super brilliant, strong, alpha. So connecting the dots, porn addiction. What do you mean? Like a guy that's struggling with porn, like that's a weak guy. That's a guy that doesn't have his life together. But he's like, no, dude, you don't understand, man. Like this thing has been crippling me for years. It literally is destroying my life. So he starts talking about some of the things that he's doing. I said, Zach, I don't know why you felt the need to share that with me, but I think that this is my opportunity to tell you what I've been struggling with. At this point, it'd been about 6 months since I've been kind of looking into this thing. I hadn't had a conversation with anybody about it yet, but I said, dude, I've been struggling for a really long time as well. I said, well, what are you going to do about it? I'm like, you know what, Zach? It's been at this point 20 years. It's been a part of my life every single day. I'm sick and tired of it, man. Like I want this out of my life for good. I need two things to happen though here today. Like I knew the power of like accountability. Even back then, I said, will you hold me accountable? Will you be there? Like, can I call you if I'm struggling? He said, absolutely, brother. I will do whatever you need. I said, the second thing I need to do is I need to go home and tell Stephanie. Stephanie was my girlfriend at the time. Our relationship was somewhat rocky, but we had been together about 4 years. And I think there was an awakening there for me that a lot of the things that we were going through was due to who I was and how I was showing up in the relationship. He said, are you sure you want to do that? I said, she needs to know the truth. He's like, well, what if she leaves? I'm like, then that's what needs to happen. But I can't continue to go on living with her not knowing the truth about who I am. So I drove home that afternoon wrestling with it, right? Like this is the point where I'm kind of getting these two conversations going on in the head. Like there's one voice like, you don't need to go do this. She's never going to know. The other one's like, no, Frank, you need to be a man of your word. Well, I shouldn't share it with her until the following morning. I was getting up, I was working, getting ready to work for the day. She was getting ready to go out and, I think she was going to work as well. So I grabbed my computer out of the closet. So this is where I knew that I had a problem because I had a secret laptop that stayed in the closet that served one purpose, was for me to pull out when I was home alone that I could watch porn on because I wasn't going to get caught. She didn't even know I owned the computer because I had been caught with previous relationships. Why are you looking at these things? Why, what's going on over here? So I said, it's never going to happen again. And also with the viruses, it's like, I'll keep it completely separate. No banking information. Like once again, very addict type behavior. Right. So I grabbed the computer out and I walk into the bathroom and I'm like, Steph, I just need to tell you something. And she was kind of pulled back, like, what's the computer? She's like, okay, what's going on, Frank? I'm like, well, I know you probably know that I do watch porn, but I don't think you really understand the level of, severity that it's had. I'm pretty sure I've had a porn addiction for the last 20 years. And I'm pretty sure it's, causing a lot of problems in my life and probably a lot of the, problems in our relationship as well. I said, but you know what, Steph, I'm done. I'm committed. I told Zach yesterday, I'm so tired of living this life that I want this out of my life. I want to prove that to you by literally destroying this laptop right now. And I took the laptop and I ripped it down the middle. It literally had two laptop pieces in my hand, which was really sounds cool, right? But it's really like laptops are really two pieces.
Yeah.
But it was cool, man, because for me it was like I felt like it was a signifying moment because it was like done. Like, and here's the proof behind it, like destruction. I'm going to do whatever I can to keep this out of my life. And then I pulled my phone up. I went through the laptop in the garbage. It was a trash day, so the garbage was already outside. And my friend Josh, who was with me, we use a video messaging app called Marco Polo. Even back then, it was something that we were using.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I shot a message to Josh, and I said, Josh, man, like, just want to keep you updated on what's been going on over here, man. Like, I know this is probably something you may think or you may know a little bit about me, but I don't think you understand the severity. I've been addicted to porn. And I spilled all the beans to him as well. And what was really cool is, I showed him the laptop. I showed him, I showed it going into the garbage. And as the lid closed, I turned the camera back on me and I was like, Josh, I don't know what this is going to lead to, but I feel like this decision in this day right now will be a defining moment that will change my life forever. And it's been cool because there's been a handful of times like when I've been struggling with the podcast or things haven't really been clicking, I'll go back and kind of watch that. Like I talked about these things, way back a long time ago. Not only has it changed my life, but it changed the rest of the world. So yeah, February 14th, after probably struggling for 20 years, February 14th of 2019 was the day that I said, I'm done. And, it's been at this point, what's 4.5 plus years.
Yeah. So on those defining moments and everything, I guess maybe take us forward the last 4 years. Like, how have you stayed out of it or broken the spirit of lust, right? Because that all comes back to different things that you're struggling with underneath at a root level. And that's a lot of what our podcast is about, is inner healing and getting to the root issue of what's really going on.
Yeah. For me, early on, it was just pure grit, discipline, and willpower. Like I will be completely honest. Like
Sure.
I knew I had the
Yeah.
ability to make a decision and not do something. And a lot of that, character development and skills were things that I developed through bodybuilding. Like you don't
Mhm.
succeed in bodybuilding without having the ability to not do certain things. So for me, there was a decision that was made
True.
and
Yeah.
I stuck to that decision. Now, a handful of things led to the healing that I needed. The first one was just my openness and willingness to talk about it. I carried zero shame about who I was because I felt the minute I told one person, I felt free, like just getting it off of my chest and being able to talk about it and being accepted. Like the fact that I was able to talk to one of my best friends, a man that I respect and somebody I really look up to, he's like, dude, I get it, man. I struggled with this as well. Made me realize like, okay, like I'm not a weirdo because I've been struggling with this. So the biggest thing that led to my healing early on was my relationships and the men in my life that supported me through it. It almost became almost like a game. Like I don't want to make light of it, but like I'm like, how many people can I tell about this? I would call every friend. I'm like, Josh, let's meet up for coffee. I got something I want to tell you. And conversation would start light, and about halfway, we turned it into, man, I've been struggling with this. But what was interesting, Heather, is every single time I opened up and talked to a guy about it, the same experience I had with Zach was exactly what it was. They said, Frank, I get it, man. Like, I don't know why you felt you couldn't talk about this, but I struggled with it as well. And these are, once again, very successful guys, business guys, entrepreneurs, doctors, lawyers. So the biggest thing that really led to the healing early on was the willingness to not allow the shame hold me back from really processing and working through it. Now, I think on the behavioral side, like I'm more of a behavioral expert. Like I understand how to change, like neurochemistry and how does that lead to kind of our habits and whatnot. So a lot of the things that I was doing was to rewire and kind of reprogram my brain. And these were things I was picking up in science articles. These were things that I was trying to understand, like how do you change these habits? I think I saw it more through my lens. I saw it more of a habit issue than an actual spirit of lust. So, obviously I know that there was a big part of that, but I think that healing was coming through the conversations. What I was very intentional about was kind of redesigning how I lived my life. I was trying to become more of a service first person because for 35 years, Frank lived for Frank. And I held no shame about that back in the day. Like I tell people, yeah, I'm an asshole because I do what I want to do. And I was almost prideful in that. So a big part of 2019 was like, okay, I want to start living for others first. So I woke up every day. It was like, who do I need to help today? Who do I need to love on? Who do I need to serve? Whether it's just sending a gratitude text message to somebody, hey man, I love our relationship. Thank you for what you do. Or actually getting out in the community and doing things. So two things that really led to it, I think, was the openness and willingness to have the conversations around it. And then looking for ways to love on other people and serve other people, because to one degree, right, a porn addiction is an intimacy disorder. Like you don't feel connected to others in your life, and probably you're not getting great fulfilling relationships. So I looked for ways to, I guess, feed into other people because I knew I would get so much out of that.
And this is just more of a personal question. Do you feel like the porn addiction a lot of times has more to do with just selfishness and wanting to gratify yourself versus gratifying a partner?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, 100%. Just the consumption of pornography in and of itself is probably one of the most selfish acts, right? It's like, I don't feel the way that I want you right now. So what can I go do for myself. So yeah, shifting out of that, instead of saying, I want to live for me, I want to live for these short-term pleasures, I want to live for, these instant hits here. What can I do in this moment? So if I felt triggered, well, who do I need to call? Who do I need to send a message to? Who do I need to reach out to? So 100%, you nailed it right on the head. It's always going to be centered around a selfishness.
Sure. So I think that, I would love to hear a little bit about the program and the men that you've helped and some success stories around that, and then maybe shift it a little bit to women, because I just am curious. A couple questions.
God, I started, so I guess maybe kind of set the tone for, how I even got into coaching, because I didn't quit porn with the idea of like, this is now going to, turn into, a business and a podcast. What was interesting is,
Sure.
So that date was February. So February, March, April. By the end of April, like I literally felt like a new man, not a new version of myself. I literally felt like a new person. My brain was healing now. Like a lot of the work I was doing physically was really, giving me a whole lot of new energy. But the podcast was something that I'd always wanted to do. Running the fitness business, I probably had 30 different whiteboard ideas of like, that's going to be the podcast, that's going to be the podcast, but none of them ever felt right. When I got on the other side of this and it started to change my life, I said, I think that there's an opportunity to share this, right? I talked about it in 2018, like there was not guys going out there talking. And the ones that were probably weren't the guys that I would have looked at and said, I want to inspire to be like him. So I think for me, knowing my background, health, fitness, business, entrepreneurship, success, personal development, like I felt like I had a lot of resources, and despite all of that, I still struggled with this thing. So what about the guy that doesn't understand personal development, doesn't understand health, fitness, he doesn't have equipped with these tools? Like, does he even understand that there's a problem? And does he feel that he has the ability to get out of it? So I started the podcast to share my story, but hopefully inspire others. So that was July of 2019. No intention behind monetizing it. I'm like, I just love conversation. I love podcasts. And I think that maybe this can help. I had people tell me, Frank, you need to do this. You need to share this. So there was a great, support network in and around me. But what was interesting with the podcast, we got picked up pretty quickly. Apple recognized us, threw us on their front page, new and noteworthy. So we got a lot of early traction, which was good because the conversation was getting heard. But I already had somewhat of a social media profile. It was all centered around fitness though, back at the time. So a lot of workouts, how to build bigger biceps, how to get 6-pack abs. Those were the type of things I used to talk about back then. After about 4 or 5 months of the podcast though, the message I started to get daily would be like, it used to be, Frank, thank you for your fitness stuff. You've changed my life because I put on 10 pounds of muscle, or, I finally got the abs I've been looking for, whatever. It's like always great. Like, and still to this day, if I get a message like that, I love it, right? If I can help somebody improve their life through the fitness, it's absolutely amazing. But the messages started to come in like, Frank, thank you for talking about these things. Like, thank you for having the conversation that we don't hear most guys talking about. Another 3-4 months go by. Frank, can you help me? Like, and at the time I was like, I don't think so. Like, I don't really know like how I did it. Like, just listen to the conversation that we're having though, and begin to really, take some action on this. And then I was at a marketing event in January of 2020. So this is about 6 months after launching the podcast. And in this event, they taught like a little kind of hand raising strategy where you can kind of, assess if your audience is even interested in something that you have to offer. And it was very simple. And I said, you know what, man, a lot of people are asking me about helping with porn addiction. Why don't I take this method and see if I can actually do something with this? So it was a simple, Twitter style post, hey, I'm looking for 5 guys that are struggling with this. I'd love to work with you over the next 4 months, not knowing what it was going to be. Like, I just picked 4 months because I said, hey, that sounds like a good time frame. And that day, I got 2 clients and turned into like $6,000 in business. So now I'm like, wow, I got to build a program for these guys. So our first 2 clients of Rebuilt Recovery, which it wasn't even Rebuilt Recovery, it was like Frank Rich Coaching back then. The first 2 clients literally worked with me week after week, and I built a curriculum with them. And there were things that I was obviously researching. There were things that I documented in my journey, what I was doing. I had, kind of some, like a backstory on social media of how I was kind of sharing things. So I said, okay, this worked here. This is what I was doing in this week. This is what the research says. This is what other, programs are doing. So I built all this into like, a 16-week curriculum. And then around May or June of that year, it kind of became like an official thing. We branded the Rebuilt Recovery. But our program, the way that I try to phrase it is really world only fully integrated, holistic, growth-centric approach to overcoming pornography addiction. And what I mean when I say fully integrated, holistic, growth-centric is starting with growth first, right? I believe that in order to overcome this addiction, you must become the man that's no longer addicted to porn. So I talk a lot about an identity change. We must change our identity and how we see ourselves and how we show up in the world. So growth-centric means that we actually believe that we can change who we are. A lot of people live in a fixed mindset. They actually don't believe that they can change. So first we have to accept that we can change and become a new version of ourselves. And then the holistic approach is we look at fitness, we look at the body, we look at the brain, the mind, and the spirit. So it obviously sits in a biblical foundation, but that's just a small component of what we do. We're pulling on the research that the science says. We're pulling on the neuroscience. We're pulling on the health components. How do we reset our gut health? And how does all that integrate together? So our program is built that we look at changing the man and then equipping him with the tools that he can change his life for the better. Now, we've had amazing stories, at this point. There's been, through our various programs and books and free stuff that we give away, we've had about 5,000 men raise their hand and say, hey, I want to be a part of your community over here. Our 16-week curriculum, we've had roughly 450 men, start down that journey with probably 350-ish, like full success stories. It's restored marriages. It's led to, engagements. Like we've had probably half a dozen guys that by the end of the 6-week program, like they'll share a picture in the group of like, the ring on the girl's finger. We've had babies kind of, created through our journey. We've had businesses launched through the program. We've had guys that have, radically transformed their physiques. We've had guys, which is always the best one, is the guy that said, Frank, I came here to help, get free from porn, but you brought me closer, or you brought me back to God. And those are always the best ones, right? Is the ones that we can bring them back to the man that they're meant to be. So yeah, it's been incredible, but I think we're just getting started. So I'm really excited about where the future is going to go, because we're actually in the process right now of updating the curriculum, because a lot of the foundation that we're working with today is still what I created back in 2020. And I feel so much more equipped with an understanding, so many lessons that I've learned, so many insights that I've gotten from working hands-on with as many men as we have. So we're getting ready here in the next couple of months to launch a 2.0 version, which I believe is radically going to change the entire game. And that's what I'm really excited about.
Well, that is very exciting, especially when all those babies get created. I just had more of a question around sort of women needing these resources, because as more women have gotten access to internet porn, that type of thing, and there's been sort of the, deconstruction of marriage and people not being faithful in their own relationships. And I've heard a lot of couples turning to porn just to liven up their marriages. And I feel like it's insanely destructive. I guess, what would you say to the women that are out there that are struggling with this, or they're using it within their relationships to try and make things better?
Yeah. Well, all the research, points to porn having no positive impact on relationships. And in fact, the couples that do watch porn together report having poor sex life than those that don't. So, anybody that says that, hey, this has improved our relationship, you might want to step back here a little bit and first realize, or ask the question, why do we need videos to improve the intimacy in our relationship? Like, I think the intimacy between two people needs to be worked on with just the two people. I don't think you need, you can have some outside, guidance and counsel, but to think that I'm going to watch a video of other people having sex is going to improve my relationship with the person that I'm not feeling connected to, like, I can't really wrap my head around like how that would even be something that somebody would believe. In terms of like women that are struggling with it, this is something I'm beginning to get more aware of. I was on a podcast last month. I flew up to Atlanta and did an in-person stream there, and they brought me in more as like the expert in the area. And then they brought a young woman in who's in her early 20s. And she's just now like overcoming hers, and is really just kind of sharing her story as more of inspiration to younger girls. I think for me, my understanding, and this is what I've read in books, and this is what I understand about brain science, is the male and female brain are completely different. Male brains visually stimulated, like we get aroused like through what we visually see. Most females, they like beautiful things, but their arousal oftentimes is more based in story. And I think for the longest time, women that have struggled with whether it's lust or struggled with some type of addiction in and around this, it's always been more in an erotica novel type of area. 50 Shades of Grey,
Yes.
the number one selling novel of all time, right? If you look at how these stories unfold, every single one of them is exactly the same. It follows an exact model. So understanding the brain, like that's how I always looked at it, is like, that's what women struggle with. Men over here, we struggle because we're just visual animals. Now, I think what you're pointing to, though, is that we have a young generation now of kids that are seeing it. The average age of first exposure for both boys and girls is 8 to 11 years old. So these young girls are getting their hands on this thing, their eyes on something, as their brain is in an early stage of development. So I do think that this is it's becoming a bigger problem than it's ever been. And if we don't understand the impact that's having, and we don't get collectively together as adults, as society, as church, whatever it is, like it's going to continue to become a problem. Because I can tell you, I've had many young girls, young women reach out to me. Now our program is centered around men. A big part of our work is community, creating safe space for guys to have conversations with other guys. I'm exploring the opportunity of maybe bringing a female on staff that could run some female-based coaching programs, because I think that could be something that we could possibly use. We could take our curriculum, tweak a couple things in and about it, and then maybe provide a place for girls or women to have regular conversations. So in terms of like how we help, we haven't yet really explored bringing any women into it, but I do know it is something that is becoming a bigger problem. And I think a lot of it is centered around the access to it. The fact that every single, not every single, but the vast majority of young kids have it. If I was 11 years old and I didn't need to go steal the magazine, or, I didn't need to pull the JCPenney catalog out and I had it in my phone, like, I don't think you and I would be sitting here today. So I do feel grateful that I grew up in a different generation, because if I would have had it when I was 11, like it probably would have had a way deeper and more hardcore impact on me.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. I guess, how would you encourage some couples to come together to really support one another and lean into Jesus in their relationships?
Yeah. Well, lean into Jesus in your relationship, right? I don't know if I have great advice outside of, lean into him and trust and have faith there, right? I think the support question I can speak to here a little bit. I know a lot of women, like they almost want to become mom in a role like this, right? They're checking, they're checking the websites, they want access to, the accountability software. They want to know, hey, what are you looking at? What are you doing here? I think that's a harmful dynamic to create within a relationship, because, like women, like they're nurturing, right? They're motherly by nature. And if you give them that type of responsibility, you're shifting the dynamic of that relationship. And now you're saying you are in charge of this over me. And I think from a male, like that is trying to break free and become like a masculine version of himself, positioning a woman to oversee him is going to be destructive for him. And it's not going to enable him to really do what he needs to do. It's going to put her in a place where she probably isn't going to respect him to the degree. So I think the role of a wife or the woman is to support, understand, but not like, what'd you look at today? What was going on here? Like if he's working through it, right? Like if he's like, I can't tell you what to do. Like if he's like, it's not a problem and I'm going to do what I want to do. Like that's a different conversation that needs to be had. But if your husband is working towards breaking free, and whether he's in a program or working with a mentor, or he's getting some help at church, or he's plugged into a men's group, whatever that is, support him in that. If he wants to talk to you about the things that he's doing, be open to it and supportive of him, but don't become the hawk. Don't be like, what'd you do today? Did you look at that? Why do you look at that young girl over there? What's on your phone right now? Why are you checking your text messages? Don't ask those type of questions, because once again, that's shifting the dynamics of the relationship. So I think the best thing is openness, right? Like we talk about truthful, honest conversations is the pathway to transformation. So the man must be honest and open, and he's got to get to a point. Sometimes guys come to us and they haven't told their wives yet. So part of what we'll do is once they get a little bit of, confidence in themselves, we'll coach them in how to try to go have this conversation. But for the guys that are hearing this, don't try to overcome this and keeping it a secret from your wife, like to where she's never going to find out. At that right time, though, begin to have those open and truthful, honest conversations. Now, I have had a couple conversations on my podcast with a woman. Her name is Jolene Wynn. She goes by the Porn Addict's Wife on social media. So what she does is, like, she has a coaching program that is built for women, for wives that are healing from their men's or their husband's porn addiction. Whether or not he's doing anything about it, like, I've always seen it as probably like, here's an opportunity. Like if the guy is working on improving himself, the guy's working on healing, like there's probably healing. You guys know this, like we all have shit that we need to work through, right? Like every single one of us has something that we need to
Absolutely.
overcome. So I think a lot of times if the guy is taking, embarking on that journey of growth and discovery and healing and transformation in his life, there's an ideal opportunity for the woman to do that as well. Definitely don't point the finger and say, you need to go fix this. Like, what role have you played in this? Yeah, the man's going to take the responsibility, but in a relationship, right? Like things don't happen in a relationship without both people having some role in that. So that's what I would say.
Absolutely. Yeah. What are some of the most significant things that the Lord has shown you through this whole journey into freedom?
That life is about more than the things that bring you pleasure. That life is about more than doing the things that you want to do. That life is really about utilizing the unique gifts and skill sets that we've been given to bring those to the world in service of others. And that's kind of, like how the podcast, like the title of my show is The Superhuman Life, and I end every episode with asking our guests, like, what does living a superhuman life mean to you? And, I've had an evolution of understanding it in my own life. So I define it as, first understanding we're here for a purpose. Like you and I are not on this earth September 13th of 2023 by accident. Like there's a divine reason why you and I are here on this planet today at this point. So first, that's been the biggest thing is like none of this is an accident. You're here for this reason. But if you just accept that God gave you a purpose and you don't explore what that is, you're not intentional about developing that. So I think the intentionality of like the growth behind whatever that purpose is, and then how do you bring that to service for the world? So for me, God has shown me like if you serve first, if you show up and love others, like He will take care of the rest. So yeah, those are a couple of the things probably.
That's awesome. So where can everybody find you? I know you've got several social media platforms and everything, and obviously the podcast, but we would love to know where we can find you.
Yeah. For anybody that's into the podcasting sphere or enjoys these type of long form conversations, you can find us on any platform. The show is called The Superhuman Life, superhuman, 2 words. Socially, yeah, TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, all Coach Frank Rich. Best place to, like, if you have questions or want to reach out to me, drop me a DM in Instagram. Coach Frank Rich is a tag there. You can learn more about Rebuilt Recovery at rebuiltrecovery.com.
Great. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.